I'm going to go through some of the ways that the cost of attendance is broken up. So UC Santa Barbara and most of the financial aid award letters that you should receive will have a kind of uh, breakdown of the cost of attendance. Um, there are different fees that are associated with the cost of attendance. So again, like I said, the student's cost of attendance is about $63,000. Um, in this student's case, the tuition fees are equal to $43,400. This is a pretty high number. This is usually because out-of-state students are charged an out-of-state tuition fee. Um, we'll look at an in-state cost of attendance in a little bit, but just know that tuition fees are mandatory fees. So this is the amount that the student will have to pay no matter what per year at UC Santa Barbara. Now, when we get to these next parts, these aren't necessarily, these are more of estimates rather than hard expenses. So usually what financial aid offices do is for housing and meals, they estimate how much a student would, it would cost a student to live in the area and pay for food. Um, it also depends on whether the student is living on or off campus. So in the student's case, they had said that they were living on campus. And so housing and meals was estimated to be about $12,000. Now, that's not always true. That's not a true cost necessarily. So the student, depending on what type of dorm they chose, so whether they lived in a double, a single, or a triple, and how many meals they had per week if they ate at the dining commons, this number would fluctuate. It could be slightly higher, slightly lower than this number. Next, we have more expenses that are estimates. Doesn't necessarily mean that the student will actually spend this amount of money on these expenses. So this first one is books and supplies. Um, it's estimated that the student will spend about this much per year on books and supplies for school. And then they estimate transportation. Transportation is a cost that can be associated with flying or um, driving, gas, whatever it is. Again, these are estimated costs, and these are expenses that aren't necessarily, they're non-mandatory expenses, meaning that this is just an estimate as to how much the school thinks that a student would pay per year on this expense. There are some other educational costs that the school will take into account. This includes healthcare, personal expenses, phone expenses, and loan fees, and they estimate that to be about 5,382. Now, with all of these estimates or mandatory costs, the total cost of attendance was about 63,000. Um, and yeah, and so let's take a look at an in-state cost of attendance. So I pulled up here the estimated cost of attendance for an undergraduate at UC San Diego. And this cost of attendance is broken down a lot better than the financial aid award letter I was showing y'all earlier. Um, so we can take a look at the estimated cost of attendance to go to UC San Diego. You see here that California residents tuition and fees, these are mandatory fees, like I had said before. And it depends on whether you live, or these fees don't change. So you can see whether you live with parents on campus or off campus, these fees will always stay the same, $14,733. However, you'll notice that, like I had said previously, housing and meals can fluctuate. We see here, so if we look at this column, if a student is living with their parents versus living on campus, the housing and meals like expenses range. So if they're living with their parents, the estimated cost is $7,000, whereas if you live on campus, the estimated cost is about $16,000. And again, for off-campus housing, it's slightly lower for on-campus. For this is 4,000-ish dollars. And then we have books and supplies. And again, this cost didn't really fluctuate, and that's because it doesn't matter who you're living with. The cost of books and supplies would be estimated to be about the same no matter what. And then we can find personal expenses. So again, these costs fluctuate. And again, books and supplies and personal expenses and transportation expenses. These are all kind of non-mandatory costs. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually going to pay all this amount. This is just an estimate. And so let's look down here. So if you're a California resident, the total cost to go to UC San Diego if you live with your parents is estimated to be about $27,000. Whereas if you live on campus, it's estimated to be about $34,000. And if you live off campus, it's estimated to be about $33,000. And we see right below it, if, for example, you're a non-California resident or you're an out-of-state student, we have this resident supplemental tuition. So this is that tuition fee, the extra out-of-state tuition fee that I was talking about a little bit earlier, that is added on if you're an out-of-state student. And so you'll see this if you do decide to go to an out-of-state school. Just a note, this is an out-of-state school, public schools, not private schools. Private schools are separate in themselves, but we see that the estimated cost totals increase by 30,000 in each one. So instead of if you lived on campus as an out-of-state student, instead of estimated cost being 34,000, it would be about 64,000.